What's up everybody, we back at it again with another Magnum Quest video, and in this one I'm going to be covering the faction hero ascension priority, meaning up to 6 stars. This comes up a lot in the Discord, whether it's a question where I have 2 heroes at 3 stars, who do I focus on, or simply I see screenshots of players' lineups with 4 2-star heroes in a single faction. It's not easy to come up with this list because it's heavily based on opinion and what you have to work with, so I'll be giving explanations and scenarios. Let's give this a shot and let's get it. Before I start this off, I did make a faction ranking importance series a while back. It's a bit outdated now, but I did redo the pinned comment. I'll show some of the thumbnails on the screen here, here, and here, just so you can get an idea, in case you want to check those out. But I don't want you to confuse that with the ranking in this video. They are different. If you lack hero copies, you can simply move to the next priority regarding whatever you feel your hero pool lacks, such as DPS or support, in order to progress or based off your summons. I rank them accordingly by this. So the best way I can describe this is, let's say the faction hero importance is instead discussing the best fast food. For me, pizza is my number one. However, I'll refer to the faction hero ascension priority as the different pizza food chains. I could have pizza ranked number 1 in fast food, but have maybe Pizza Hut 5th in pizza food chains. The pizza for the most part is still good, it still does the job it's meant to do, which is get me fat. There's just better options such as Domino's. Hopefully this isn't confusing anyone. As I was saying it kind of made sense, maybe it didn't. But let's use the fortress here as an example. I'm going to be using my second account as reference because I need a crap load of hero food on this account, so it's easier to visually see what I mean. For the fortress faction, my order of ascension priority works like this. 6-star DPS priority would be Wyndon, then Ekra, then Fang, then Auric, and then Flan. 6-star support priority would be Arthur, then Cinia, then Lillian, and then Bill. You'll come to see DPS, in my opinion, takes priority over support, as the heroes require higher investments such as Ascension stars to reach their best potential. So Cinia, on my little mini-series I did, as I mentioned, for faction hero importance, Cinia was number 2 in the Fortress faction. Here she's like number 7 depending on how you look at this, but this is because she doesn't need the Ascension stars to do what she's good for. I mean, of course it helps, higher stats, better survivability, etc. But there's better options that will benefit from it more. So now let's get into the breakdown. I'm going to give some explanations and some scenarios. So for DPS, Wyndon, I chose Wyndon over Ekra because Ekra is a late game queen. Wyndon will benefit you more earlier on, and he has the ability to one-shot enemy stages, or at least close to, and has great support buffs for intelligence heroes and your hero with the highest attack. These next two can be interchangeable depending on your progress and summons. Next is Ekra, one of the top late game DPSers and a very nice situational asset to have. Synergizes great with Wyndon and Cinia in the Fortress dungeon. Lots of her damage comes from the burn effect. Just remember effects like burn, poison, bleed, these cannot crit. And at level 201, her ultimate can apply the heal block effect, which comes in very handy on specific enemy stages with a lot of heals. Next is Fang. He's able to put up some very high numbers on bosses, even at relatively low ascension stars, maybe like 3-star plus, with his passive damage boost, but will truly shine endgame with high investment. Pre-level 201, however, he's very squishy. Still squishy at 201, but the shield he gets after doing ultimate damage helps. Just remember, he doesn't get the shield until after he does damage, so he can be defeated while in the animation. If you lack damage on bosses, whether that's guild bosses or awakened demons, which is what I'm currently lacking on my second account, Fang will definitely help with this, so I would take him higher first over Ekra. These next two can also be interchangeable depending on your opinion and your summons. So next is Auric. He can output some decent damage if invested into. Lots of self buffs like attack and haste, and he can lower the enemy's haste and accuracy. I think he's one of the more well-rounded heroes in this game, it's just the other DPS take priority. He's also available in the trial store, so he's easier to attain copies. So next is Flan. So depending on your luck with summons, if you pull more Flan copies than Auric, I would bump her above him because of the potential ultimate reset. With the AoE damage you're going to be doing with, let's say, Wyndon and Ekra, there's a good chance you can get multiple resets off, which can help with the Fortress dungeon and even some chapter adventure stages. Now moving over to the support, Remember, you can leave some of your supports at 1 star or 3 star for quite some time while focusing more on the DPS heroes I just mentioned. So for Arthur, he really needs the Ascension stars to stay alive long enough to get his ultimate off with the shields. His shields and quick heal are based off his attack, so the Ascension star improvements add to his shield and heal value. I think he's going to help out a lot of players, especially with Awakened Demons. I know he has for me, getting to level 10 and the Fortress Dungeon. Next is Cinia. Going to be one of your most valuable support buffers for PvE, including bosses and Fortress Dungeon, due to her skill kit. It's such as her ultimate, evenly distributing energy to your heroes. Doesn't need high Ascension stars to do what she does, but for her to survive specifically on the Frost Peak guild boss without Arthur, because this boss hits harder than the puppet bosses, you will need to put some more stars on her. This is especially needed, I think, for Ashe level 8+, without her getting defeated in a couple hits, which is the situation I'm running into right now. Next is Lillian. I'm still on the fence with her. I think she's a middle tier hero after testing her out. She's not amazing, she's not bad. She's very situational, but provides a lot of healing to a single hero while providing energy. Because her heals are on a single hero, this is why she's so-so for me. She also focuses those heals on the furthest hero ahead, so there can be a lot of frustration with RNG depending on your setup for getting the right heal off on the right hero. And then finally is Bill. Even though Arthur, the other Fortress tank, does fall off, he's still way more beneficial for your game with what he provides compared to Bill. Bill is definitely more tanky, and his ultimate, if timed correctly, charges and applies the knockdown effect to enemies hit, so essentially could be a huge game shift, interrupting the right enemy's spellcasting, but he's still very low priority. Now we're going to move over to the Wild faction, where you're going to see I have my hero's a little bit of a mess right now in terms of what I'm doing. My order of Ascension priority works like this. 6-star DPS priority would be Ares, then Issy, then Hista, then Gilla, then Manton, and then finally Xander. 6-star support priority would be Harry, Naomi, and then Rickers. Regarding Gaia, if you chose to utilize her early on, get her maxed first, but this is only up to 3 stars due to being a silver to gold hero, which makes for easy food to bump your Ares up later. Now let's go over the explanations and scenarios. So for DPS, Ares, for all the known reasons, he's a heavy carry once he's level 201. He will be your best asset for mid to late game. He will eventually fall off, but for the majority of players, this will not be for a very long time, like Chapter 27+. He's got invulnerability with a big damage dealing ultimate while being immune to CC and magic damage. These next two can be interchangeable depending on your progress and your summons. So next is Issy. She does great damage, but it's more so for her utility she brings with her swarms being able to stun when they crit, as well as her ultimate's attack and energy debuff. This will be super helpful in the Wild Dungeon, Fairhaven Trial in general. A lot of players tend to push her to the side, but an invested Issy is no joke, another well-rounded hero in this game. Next is Hista. Hista has a lot of self-attack buffs like haste, crit, attack, but needs investment specifically in her star map, where there's a lot of leech options because she dies very fast. However, her boss damage is definitely top tier. The bleed effect results in crazy damage as it remains consistent through the entire boss fight duration. Both heroes do good damage on bosses, but Hista will definitely pull ahead, so if you lack damage on bosses and you want those high numbers, Hista will definitely be the better option. These next two can also be interchangeable depending on your opinion and your summons. So next is Gilla. For me, honestly, she's dropping a tier on my latest tier list when I update it. She does average damage on bosses, totally outshined by her fellow wild hero Hista, but she's more useful in PvE non-boss content, due to if she defeats the target with her ultimate, the enemy's attack is evenly distributed to your team. Plus her knockback effect on her Dance of Chaos skill for enemy disruption. The poison is nice, but the previous heroes are just better options. Next is Manton. I don't have much experience with him, but after talking with players who have him maxed, he's great at applying the defense debuff on bosses, so your DPS heroes do more damage. And he's got great potential for damage with his self buff as his HP drops, gaining attack, crit, and crit damage, and then eventually haste. As more testing is done, I feel Manton might provide more overall to your setup than Gilla. I haven't fully decided this yet. And then finally Xander. Not much experience with Xander. He is available from the trial shop, but I wouldn't suggest wasting your currency on him. I have been talking with players who have invested into him, and with his self-haste buff and his ultimate, since it attacks twice and it's AoE, if he crits, both those can be pretty nasty. He's just still a very low priority hero. Moving down to support, we have Harry. He isn't a solo carry like Ares, He's a tank support buffer, however he's equally just important. A must-have hero for the game with his ultimate. You can get away with low ascension stars until you've got your Ares to 6 stars. Next up is Naomi. She's going to provide great help in the Wild Faction dungeon. Used occasionally in stages where you need to debuff the enemy with her ultimate applying the disperse effect, as well as heals plus an attack and defense buff to your wild heroes and then eventually your whole team. She's also available in the ladder store, but I would prefer saving for either Sir or Kados because I think it's more beneficial. And then finally Rickers. He can do his job with low stars due to his high base stats, so he's really tanky and he does what he needs to do and provides a crapload of stun CC. Moving over to the Forest faction, once again, you're going to see kind of a mess right now on this account. I've got heroes all over the place. I need a crapload of hero food. So this is probably going to be the best example to show you what I think is the best way to star up your heroes and what priority. My order of ascension priority works like this. 6-star DPS priority is going to be Phi, and then it's going to be Cyan. 6-star support priority is going to be Ione, or Ione, however you want to pronounce her name. Then Fair, then Amelia, then Oshishi, then Alwyn, and then Monroe. So now let's get into the explanations and scenarios. So this faction is definitely one of the more hero food heavy ones because of all the top tier heroes in here. It's important, like I said, not to spread out your hero ascension stars evenly without a game plan like having a bunch of 2 stars, because this is going to hurt your progression by a lot. So for DPS, Phi, for me, hands down, the hero to take to 6 stars first. He's used in all aspects of the game. His haste and energy at the beginning of the fight is invaluable, and he's going to be your top priority for damage in the Forest Dungeon with investment. And finally, Cyan. I never got copies with him on my main yet, but as you can see on this account right now, I'm flooded with hero copies of him. He does some great damage specifically on bosses. One of the tricks I used when going through the early game was place him opposite side the enemy Fair to change his pull skill direction. He's really good in PvP, and unfortunately his ultimate is very handy in PvE minus bosses. Its intended use doesn't work on bosses, so he eventually gets outshined on DPS by others. Moving down to the support, we have Ione. Biggest help for your progression because she can keep your heroes alive with her revival shield skill, saving them from taking fatal damage. Her CC with the entangle effect is good, however sometimes very unreliable and doesn't always do the quick stun for enemy skill interruption. Next is Fair. Even though with the introduction of Lycidas, I still think Fair will be a great asset to speed through early game, especially if you're using Gaia. For his Fatal Attraction pull skill, as most of the heroes Lycidas typically would teleport early on, would not have the levels needed to unlock the better part of their skills. Fair will need those Ascension stars eventually to be able to survive the frontliner hits. These next two can be interchangeable depending on your progress in summons. Next is Amelia. Now the only reason I have her ahead of Oshishi is because if you're thinking long term, she is one of the top supports to aid in your DPS for bosses and needs those Ascension stars to stay alive. She will also come in handy for the Forest Dungeon. Her enchantment of the wind skill to give surrounding allies haste is superior to Phi's because Phi's is only at the beginning of the battle. Next is Oshishi. She's going to be saving you on many enemy stages because of the amount of CC she can provide. She can AoE sedate the enemy, which is sleep. She can buff your heroes with the highest attack with haste. This hero is crazy, but she does not need the Ascension stars to do what she does. Most of the time you're going to be pairing her up with Ione anyways, so she's going to be pretty safe. If you're unlucky with Amelia copies, starring up Oshishi isn't a bad thing to help you avoid not meeting the minimum power requirements on enemy stages if you use her regularly. Next is Alwyn. I'm sure by now if you've been watching my videos, you know I'm not a huge fan of her, but she does have her purposes. Can be super helpful keeping your heroes alive when doing the Awakened Demons. Her Bewitch skill, if she chooses the right enemy, since it's random, can change the outcome of a fight. I just don't see the need in wasting your forest food resources to get her Ascensions up before the others mentioned when she falls off rather fast. And finally, Monroe. I don't have much experience with Monroe, but all the other heroes mentioned in Forest, in my opinion, all take priority over him. Many better frontliner options to use, and Forest Dungeon can be done without him. He's got a nice haste debuff, and ultimate can apply knockdown effect, which interrupts the enemy spell casting, but he's very low priority. Moving over to the Shadow faction, where I basically have no heroes because I don't do my faction summons on this. My order of Ascension priority works like this. 6-star DPS priority would be Durla, Gus, Vieira, Carlotta, and then Sorsha. 6-star support priority would be Lycidas, Alden, Marielith, and then Julian. Now let's get into the explanations and scenarios. So for DPS, Durla, hands down the best DPS in Shadow. The trick is actually having her survive long enough to get her ultimate off. Her energy gain sucks, so it's a good idea to have the green energy rune on her while pairing her up with an energy buffer like Phi or Cinia. All her damage and survivability comes from her ultimate as well as dead enemies. Next is Gus. So I know what you're thinking, Gus, really? Gus can perform high damage wise, but we're talking serious investment maxed out. Very good on bosses like Bill in the Puppet Wars, Winded in Puppet Corpse for the faction advantage, and his skill kit. Since there's only going to be one enemy, all his skills will only focus that boss. Solid alternative DPS option for Puppet War due to not being able to use the same hero twice. Next is Vieira. I have her ranked here because compared to the others after, her damage potential and what she brings to the table is better. She can drop some high damage numbers if invested into on bosses like I mentioned, like the Puppet Corpse Winden due to the faction advantage, and her ultimate, which is the main thing, if Misty her fox is alive, can disable enemy shields, so this is very useful. Next, Carlotta. Even though I don't use her much anymore, she's still a decent assassin. I feel she shines better in enemy stages rather than having her on your team. She has fallen off for me since new heroes have been introduced, but she's still rather nice with her Traceless skill, where she gains stealth and an attack boost. And finally we have Sorsha. Her damage numbers, even at maxed, aren't anything to rave about. I use her mostly for the weaken effect on the enemy in mirrored position, her quick stun, and then the bear skill, which allows her to be annoying coming back to life. Moving down to support, we have Lycidas, aka Dracula. Ever since his introduction to the game, he's been a game changer. He's changed up a lot of the metas I've mentioned before, and he can also drop some good damage, but that's not what I use him for. I use him for the ability to teleport a frontliner hero to the enemy such as Kados, along with his silence and other debuffs like accuracy. He creates a blood contract with the teleported hero, which boosts survivability. Next is Alden. He's always been a good hero. His freeze effect is super annoying in Chapter Adventure if you don't interrupt his ultimate along with his Necromancer skill, but with Lycidas he became even better for the reason I mentioned with teleport. Next is Marielith. Unfortunately doesn't see much playtime besides Shadow Dungeon. She's got some nice debuffs like Silence and has a better version of the Bewitch effect compared to Alloin. And then finally Julian, basically a damage sponge as I've said before. I haven't seen the need for him yet, but his main skill is after his death where he becomes immune to physical damage to be a wall for your backline. He takes more magic damage in this state, so it's a hit or miss depending on the enemy setup. So for my final thoughts, just remember how I look at this game is like this. DPS needs more Ascension stars, so depending on your progress and how your summons go, I think it's better to keep the heroes I mentioned as supports at low stars till you build up your DPS. And then in terms of Sir or Kados, I would prioritize Sir first to 6 stars as you'll get much more benefit from her as she's used in all aspects of the game, and then you can focus Kados. As always, thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, hopefully it wasn't too confusing. Subscribe for future videos, and stay tuned for the next one.